I'm Shannon Martin. Tonight, just one day after it was announced, there's pushback against the plan to move the Ontario Science Centre.
There's businesses around here. They need the Science Centre.
I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's going to harm this community.
We'll hear what the Ford government is saying about why the move is necessary. Plus,
So I went in, they informed me today that there's a labor strike.
It annoys me, it's always the government people that go on strike.
We don't want to be out here. The government has forced our hand.
more than 100,000 federal workers are on strike, how it could impact everything from passport processing to your taxes. And
They made the pod jobs legal today?
Yeah.
That's great.
And I challenge Mississauga to take a look at the effects this has on their youth.
city councillors in Mississauga give the green light to legal pot shops. Thanks for joining us. Questions continue for the Doug Ford government tonight over its plans to relocate the Ontario Science Centre. Opposition parties want more transparency about what it'll cost and why it's happening. Lorenda Redekop is live at the Science Centre for us. Lorenda, you spent the day talking to people in the neighborhood. What are you hearing?
Well, they feel like this is a done deal, and this is basically the first they're hearing about it, and that they weren't consulted. There were actually a couple of young women who were walking across the street in front of us here, and they were yelling out to us saying, "Don't move the Science Centre." What we heard from the Premier yesterday, he was saying, hey, people may be losing the Science Centre in this neighborhood, but they are gaining more transit. Some people here, though, they say that's not good enough for them. Whenever it opens, the Eglinton Crosstown stop at Don Mills will be called Science Centre, at least for now. That will have to change once the government moves the facility to Ontario Place. People who live in this area are concerned about what the move means for their neighborhood.
Why you put so much transit, so much money into transit, and then all of a sudden, you're talking about moving the Science Centre. On top of it, he's even saying that it will be smaller downtown. So it doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's going to harm this community. This is a place where people can bring their kids, and it's been here for years.
The proposed site for the Science Centre is kind of too far, right? And I think also the location is very busy. It's not really easy for the kids to...
The proposed site would be along the lakeshore at Ontario Place, part of the development unveiled yesterday. It would be a neighbor to a large private spa.
SOS. Save our Science Centre.
The local Liberal MPP says that's what he's hearing from his residents. He acknowledges the building does need renovations, but doesn't feel bulldozing it is the answer, especially just as more transit is coming, including the upcoming Ontario line.
It also feels like a tremendous bait and switch, that these lines were created with the promise of the Science Centre being at the very core of that area.
Infrastructure Minister Kinga Surma was interviewed on CBC Radio's Metro Morning earlier today.
For many years now, we've known as a government that the Science Centre was in disrepair, in desperate need of rehabilitative work, and so government issued a business case analysis.
She says a business case showed repairs would be more money than a whole new building, but could provide no numbers.
The cost was higher. It was much more expensive.
But what was the cost specifically?
While the government is doing its due diligence, we are verifying all of the numbers included in the business case before we share that information with the public.
The details of the province's deal with the spa company are also still unknown. Opposition parties want more transparency on that, too, the amount and the length of the contract, in addition to the questions about the Science Centre.
I want to see the business case. I want to see, the costs associated with this. I want to know when and where this was concocted and who was at the table.
Now, the chair of the board of this Science Centre, he says that expensive repairs would be needed. This opened back in the late 60s, and a lot of things have changed since then. He talked about there now being internet and Wi-Fi, things that when this was built, it was state-of-the-art at the time, but things have changed a lot. Another example of this building having seen better days is one of the entrances is now closed, and people have to be brought by shuttle bus across to the other entrance. But the chair of the board, he didn't know how much all of this would cost to repair. So lots of questions that people have about this deal.
Yes, lots of questions and lots more still to come. Thanks, Lorenda. She's reporting for us from the Science Center. Okay, the other big story we're tracking tonight, tens of thousands of federal workers on strike as picket lines are set up at hundreds of locations right across the country. As Kate McKenna shows us, it's being called a once-in-a-generation strike, one that could impact everything from passports to your taxes.
Workers, united, will never be defeated.
United and defiant. Throngs of workers hit the picket lines, demanding more from government.
My friends, when we work together in solidarity, we will win, and we will win this fight.
That's right. Scenes like this reproduced across the country.
I think that we're showing them that we're here and they need to listen to what we want.
Ultimately, I'm just trying to get ahead in life, have an independent life, get out of the parents' basement.
Every time you go to the store, the prices are unbelievable. The gas keeps going up.
Canadians will feel this strike. Some services like pensions and employment insurance will stay up and running, but new passports will only be issued in exceptional cases.
I got the photo, everything ready.
This man was hoping to visit China. Now his plans are on hold.
If possible, I plan to go in the middle of May. I don't know if it's possible.
How does that make you feel?
I have no choice.
The government warns of long waits processing taxes, immigration papers, passing through borders, and more.
To Canadians, we know that our strike poses unneeded challenges.
The main sticking point is wages. The union wants a 13.5% increase over 3 years. The government has offered 9%.
We will continue to work with the PSAC to reach agreements that are fair and competitive, but we cannot do that unless the union is prepared to compromise. We cannot write a blank check.
Other issues include job security and clear rules around working from home. The government says that'll hurt its ability to function.
The reality is Canadians have every right and expectation to see the services that they expect delivered.
Justin Trudeau says he wants to respect labor rights and let the process play out. But the government could introduce back to work legislation. If it does that, the NDP has already said that it won't support it, meaning the Liberals would need to find votes from either the Bloc Québécois or the Conservatives. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Mississauga has officially reversed its prohibition on pot shops after hours of debate at City Hall. Council voted 8-4 to lift the ban. Up until now, Mississauga was Ontario's largest municipality without any legal cannabis stores. Talia Ricci spent the day getting reaction.
Today's long-awaited decision was welcome news for many in the cannabis industry.
There's a lot of people that are happy because it's going to open up a lot of business opportunities, open up a lot of wonderful job opportunities in that city. It's going to help a lot of locals save on costs. Now they're not driving 20 minutes, they're only driving 5 minutes.
But at Canna Cabana and Brampton, today is also bittersweet.
We've kind of built a relationship with a lot of our regulars from Mississauga, and we are going to be super sad to see them go.
Mississauga Council voted in favor today of allowing legal pot shops.
This has been passed 8-4.
It was one of dozens of municipalities to ban retail cannabis stores when legalization came into effect in 2018. Now, 4.5 years later, the push to get Mississauga on board was successful.
While there are still illegal cannabis purchases being made, the best way to continue to undermine the illegal market is to have a legal market that is taxed and regulated with standards and licensing.
Last week, councillors debated a city report highlighting that its residents were disproportionately served by the illegal market. The report also noted that those shops don't pay taxes, their products were inconsistent in levels of THC, and had packaging that could appeal to kids.
That's one of the main reasons we're supporting this. We want to wipe out the illegal black market. We don't want 16-year-olds buying cannabis.
But the risk of cannabis becoming a gateway drug is enhanced remarkably when the same supplier who shows up your door has more to offer in their bag of tricks than dry cannabis flower.
Back in 2018, the city was concerned about having several stores in one block. Those same concerns were brought forward today.
We've banned tanning beds for kids under 19 because it's bad for their health. And we banned flavored tobaccos in hookah pipes. But for some reason, it's wide open day on putting these stores all over the place wherever you want them.
Most residents were happy to hear the motion was passed, while some say they thought Mississauga was right to wait.
People that wanted this always had it, like access to it. Now the city's just coming on board with, I guess, the rest of Canada. I think Mississauga made a smart choice in waiting it out also to see the results of the other municipalities.
It's silly that it took this long.
I think it's a step in the right direction.
This store manager agrees.
There's still way too much taboo around cannabis, and the fact that cities still aren't allowing legal dispensaries into their city is it's disheartening, because it is a legal market now.
The city manager will send a letter to the province informing them of the change within the next 3 days. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
A woman is dead and 2 people injured after a multi-vehicle crash in Etobicoke. It happened late last night at Albion and Finch. Police say a vehicle lost control, smashing into a number of other cars. 65-year-old Hazela Baksha was pronounced dead at the scene. We've learned from her relatives tonight that she was on her way home from Ramadan prayers at the time. 2 other people were taken to trauma centers with serious injuries. Investigators believe one of the drivers involved in the crash was impaired. So far, no charges have been laid. Colette's joining us now. I don't have my glasses on. I was trying to see if you had your electric blue eyeliner on tonight.
I had a hard time getting that off, actually.
I believe it.
Shannon.
I believe it.
Yeah, just put it on probably again tomorrow. But yeah, we are looking at pink today. We'll get back to our blue tomorrow for our Leafs. Let's also look at what's happening, though, for today with these temperatures. I know, kind of cool. I mean, 1 degree this morning, our low, and then not even able to struggle to double digits for our daytime high. So where we're sitting now is essentially the high for the day, 9 degrees, Toronto, Mississauga, and then Markham at 8 and Hamilton at 8, and you could see Oshawa even a little bit cooler there. So we have that. We know we had the winds, and these last 3 hours or so they backed off as they were supposed to, but those gusts lasted a little longer, so it really was a cooler feel, especially before the lunch hour. Now we're just looking at the current sustained winds. They've eased somewhat, but I have to tell you, they're going to be picking up again, and that's as we have another system approaching as we go into a portion of the day tomorrow. Now, it will be later in the day, so we get a break tonight, early tomorrow, but also important to note will be the direction. So east to northeasterly, and that easterly flow, when we're in that, we tend to see some cooler temperatures because it comes off the lake and that lake influence. So tomorrow our temperatures held down a little bit as well. And then we're going to see those winds kind of ramping up as we get into the latter part of the day. So that's something you want to be aware of. We're dry for now, but we have showers moving in for tonight. And in fact, I'd say between about 11 and 7 a.m., the greatest chance for those showers, 3. And then we'll break out of it tomorrow afternoon and a high, Shannon, of 10 degrees.
Okay, sounds good. We'll see you shortly.
Okay.
An update from the city tonight on how it's progressing in its effort to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. Ali Chiasson has the latest.
In December 2021, Toronto introduced Transform TO
to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto to net zero by 2040.
So the targets have been set. How are we doing?
We know it is possible. And thanks to the hard work of Team Toronto, we continue to make progress on that plan.
Today was kind of like a progress report outlining the steps the city is taking to reach net zero emissions, including incentives for homeowners to go solar, drivers to go electric, expanding Toronto's cycling network, waste reduction programs, tree planting, and expanding the rollout of electric vehicle charging stations at parking lots across the city. While McKelvey speaks in a tone of optimism,
Toronto, together we can do this.
Councillor Diane Sachs, a longtime environmentalist, speaks with urgency.
The choices now before us are not whether we're going to have climate change or not, it's how much suffering we're going to have from climate change. The more we take advantage of this crisis to get off fossil fuels, the better off we'll be as a city.
So people who can afford to buy a new electric car can opt in, but what about the rest of Toronto?
EVs are great, but are they going to be able to
make us hit net zero as fast as transit would, right?
Chrisanne Virasingham of the Scarborough Environmental Association says the city would do better by the environment if they looked at it through an equity lens.
If we had that same, drive to benefit people who are lower income, who rely on transit, honestly, we'd make more of a difference for more people.
All the different actions matter, whether they're about green space, whether they're about homes or transit, but they all need to be done. It's not a question of just picking and choosing, one or the other.
Emma Ma from the Toronto Environmental Alliance says the city not only needs to follow through, but be realistic as well.
We're a little bit concerned that the city may be papering over some of the really big challenges that the city is experiencing in terms of advancing the climate goals, including managing to secure dedicated funding for the strategy. We know that the city is in a financial crisis.
The city will have an infrastructure and environment committee meeting next week to go over the net zero strategy and just how it will reach the city's green goals. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, turning to the race for the mayor's chair next, Josh Matlow says if elected, he'll boost access to public libraries, pledging to open all of the city's branches on Sundays.
We need to use our libraries better. On Sundays, we can ensure that seniors have a place to come to congregate together. Rather than stay in their apartments, come out and enjoy programming where they can learn and be part of the community. Youth who need a place to be safe, to be active, and to be with other friends.
The Open Libraries plan would be funded by $1.5 million from Matlow's $115 million Community Health and Safety Fund that he previously announced. Currently, only 19 branches are open on Sundays during the summer and just 58 during the school year. Matlow says they're an important public space offering vital services. Meantime, Anna Bailau was talking transit today.
So when we talk about reversing the cuts, about making sure that we have more staff so they can feel safer, there's eyes and ears, so in case of any incident, action can be taken immediately.
She was out campaigning near Wellesley Station. She says she will pressure Bell, Rogers, and TELUS to work together to make sure 911 and cell phone service are available to all subway riders. She also plans to add more security cameras on the TTC if she becomes mayor. Well, turning to Brad Bradford next, he says he'll take action as mayor to make sure the courts are keeping a close eye on people released on bail and awaiting trial by setting up dedicated bail compliance units.
The system is failing, and violent offenders know it. Nobody is watching to ensure that they comply with the law. So what's the solution? Every time this happens, politicians call on the federal government to move on bail reform. It's not quite thoughts and prayers, but if we're being honest, it's not too far from it either.
Bradford says his plan would call for the hiring of 68 new officers with the Toronto Police Bail Compliance Unit. Their job to exclusively monitor people in the community released on bail. He says the program would cost $16 million a year and suggests the province foot the bill. And after placing second in last fall's election and declaring intent to run again for mayor this time around, Gil Penalosa is saying no to a by-election campaign, instead choosing to endorse Olivia Chow.
And I was ready to run because I had not seen anyone that had the commitment to equity, that had shared the same values. So I was very delightful when Olivia Chow decided to run.
The urban planner was joined by NDP MPP Kristen Wong-Tam, who is also throwing support behind Chow. Chow, the former city councillor, Toronto MP, and candidate for mayor back in 2014, registered earlier this week. Penalosa says he relates to Chow as an immigrant, adding they share similar beliefs. He came second to John Tory last fall, earning nearly 100,000 votes for mayor. Okay, Leafs fans, time to talk about it. You're probably still recovering tonight after that devastating 7-3 loss against Tampa in Game 1 of the opening playoff series. As Greg Ross tells us, it's all the feels: sadness, frustration, anger, and a sense of deja vu.
I kind of yelled a fair bit last night.
To be clear, Leafs fan Kylie Elpick wasn't cheering last night. She was yelling out of frustration while watching the Tampa Bay Lightning score goal. After goal. After goal. Can you repeat what you were yelling last night?
No. Sorry.
Is there a PG version of what you were yelling last night?
Oh gosh darn. Things like that, yeah.
Not happy.
No, not at all.
She traveled a long way to go to last night's game and paid more than $350 for her ticket. She was not expecting to see the Leafs get blown out 7-3.
That was sad to see. Like, I flew over from Australia for this.
She wasn't the only unhappy Leafs fan.
Here we go again is probably a good analogy, and frustration and some eye rolling, I guess.
Because it's same old, nothing changes. We've got players who can do it in the regular season, and they just can't get it done when it comes to the playoff time. And
after practice today, Leafs players told us the frustration has not seeped into their dressing room.
We don't listen to anything. We don't read what you guys are saying. We don't worry about anything. We just worry about ourselves in here. That's all you can worry about at the end of the day. So
I've been here for a while, so I've been through it. So it is what it is. Don't really worry too much about it.
That is clearly how head coach Sheldon Keefe wants his team to handle any outside distractions.
How important is that these guys are able to shut that out?
Very.
The Leafs will get a chance to turn the page tomorrow night when they host the Lightning in Game 2 back here at Scotiabank Arena. Now, the Leafs will need to bounce back in order to avoid falling down 2-0 before heading to Tampa for Games 3 and 4. Greg Ross, CBC News.
Another attempt at a ceasefire in Sudan has failed as fighting continues. The government says since the conflict broke out, at least 270 people have been killed and hundreds more injured. As Chris Brown shows us, there is a very real fear that the country could collapse.
In Sudan's capital, it's become so dangerous to go outside. Most of the limited video the world is seeing of the chaos is smoke rising from the skyline. Rival fighters from the army and a powerful militia group are waging indiscriminate battles in residential neighborhoods. It's the same across the country, including in North Darfur, where we reached aid worker Thomas Okedi sheltering in a guest house.
It's a dangerous situation, and the most risky part at the moment is trying to move from one city to another.
Canada has closed its embassy in Sudan. Countries such as Japan and Kenya are preparing to evacuate their nationals, but haven't said how. A succession of failed ceasefires has come and gone.
For the first time in my life, I made a farewell video to my son.
This Belgian deep sea diver who was in Sudan on a work trip fears there is no way to escape.
Even if you can make it through all these checkpoints and through bands of criminals or RSF or anyone that wants to appropriate what you have, if it's not your life as well, then the next case is, where do we go?
All of this is because two former allies couldn't agree on which side should take the lead role in a new civilian administration. And now it feels as if the entire country is collapsing.
The World Food Programme lost 3 of its staff on the first day of the conflict. Relief International lost 1 of its staff. Save the Children was looted overnight, about 2 nights ago. And so even as humanitarian organizations, we are living under constant fear.
The warring sides were apparently close to a deal before it fell apart 5 days ago and the fighting started. The faint hope now is that it's not too late to salvage it. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
In other news, India will soon be considered the most populous country in the world. New data from the United Nations estimates its population will hit just over 1.4 billion. As Salima Shivji shows us, it comes as the country is facing a serious social divide.
Rural Bihar in northern India, and this is the norm. So many children crowding the small village in the district with the highest fertility rate in India. A community worker preaching family planning doesn't get far. It's a snapshot of one of India's least developed states, where the population is exploding, and many young mothers feel like Chandani Devi, societal pressure for a treasured boy. This is my 4th baby girl, she says, but I was hoping for a boy. The strain of a growing population in one of India's most populated states bleeds to the big cities. On the streets of Delhi, young people congregate, waiting and hoping for the possibility of earning a day's wages. Mohammed Asif Alam is a mason by trade from Bihar. There's no work back home, he says, so we come to Delhi. But here too, there are no guarantees. We struggle. I'm far from my family and alone, 20-year-old Avdesh Kashyap says. But what choice do I have? I need work to feed my children. India, now considered the most populous country in the world ahead of China, has hit a milestone that comes with a unique set of demographic challenges. The population data across the country shows wildly varying birth rates from state to state. Essentially, there are two Indias. The north with very high birth rates and so many young people, and the more developed south, where the population is aging. That sharpening divide is also cause for concern politically, says this expert.
Since there are fewer number of people in the south, they're going to have fewer, smaller constituencies. The divide between the north and south will be much more than just numbers. And that will be a divide difficult to deal with politically.
Even if India's fertility rate is dropping and the population slowly stabilizing, with more young Indian women yearning for a higher education and fewer children. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
The United Nations also urging countries around the world to do more when it comes to protecting women's reproductive rights. As Lisa Shing shows us, the UN is warning governments against trying to influence fertility rates with policies it says can be harmful.
As the global population reaches 8 billion, there's a lot of talk about overpopulation and underpopulation and a lot of worry too. And so in this latest report from the United Nations Population Fund, it aims to shatter some of these myths around population, especially since they're leading to government policies that impinge on women and girls' rights. Now, this report gives several examples of governments trying to influence fertility rates using public campaigns and persuasion. Other measures are more concerning and overt, saying some countries are restricting abortion rights, eliminating sex education even, and other countries are forcing sterilization to control the population. So this report says all of these measures aren't that effective, especially in the long run. Here's Natalia Kanem, the executive director of the UNFPA.
The question isn't whether the human population is too large or too small. The question is, can everyone exercise their fundamental human right to choose the number and spacing of their children? Sadly, the answer is a resounding no. The world will not solve the greatest challenges by treating fertility rates as the problem. Inequality is the problem.
Now, the report found 56% of women are not able to make their own choices over their reproductive and health rights. Now, the report also said that fertility rates are linked to concerns about climate as well as the economy, and there are better ways to address that than looking at fertility, including policies that reduce carbon emissions and policies that support women and girls. That's according to UBC economics professor Marina Adshade.
Some of the responsibility of taking care of children needs to be taken off women's shoulders. We need to make it easier for women to have children, because I think the truth is, I think there are a lot of women who would have more children than they're having if it was easier for them to do it.
The UN report says experts now generally agree that population fluctuations are normal and that countries right now need to focus on policies that improve people's quality of life. Lisa Shing, CBC News.
Welcome back. We have important new legislation to tell you about tonight. Federal judges must now consider violence towards a partner when deciding on child custody cases. It's called Kira's Law. Named after a 4-year-old girl back in 2020, her body was found in a conservation area in Milton after multiple judges ignored warning signs about her father's potential for violence. Marina von Stackelberg spoke with Kira's mom today and has our story.
I like all the dark colors.
Kira Kagan has been gone for 3 years, but her name will now live on in a new law meant to prevent deaths like hers.
She would have done great things, so, we're going to do them for her.
Kira and her biological father were found dead at the bottom of a cliff west of Toronto. Her mother, Jennifer, believes it was a murder-suicide. She had been abused by her ex-husband and went to court dozens of times trying to prevent him from having unsupervised access to their daughter.
I was before a judge with a background in labor and employment law, and he cut me off on the stand when I was talking about domestic violence and parenting and the effect on our daughter. And he said, domestic violence is not relevant to parenting, pathological lying is not relevant to parenting, and I'm going to ignore it.
Kira's law will require federal judges be educated on intimate partner and family violence, including coercive and controlling behaviors. Kira's stepdad, himself a family lawyer, says too often judges have not believed emotional and psychological abuse is a sign someone could be a bad parent.
We're still using really outdated stereotypes on what domestic violence looks like in the current modern society. It's no longer bumps and bruises.
Judges will now also have to consider making someone accused of abusing their partner wear an electronic monitoring device as a bail condition.
When a woman or family member chooses to seek protection for themselves and their children is the most dangerous moment.
This, in fact, is one reason why women often will stay with an abusive partner. They feel as though if they stay in the relationship, they can protect the children from being alone with the father.
This law will only apply to federal judges, but the hope is it will spark similar changes in provinces and territories and throughout the entire child welfare system. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ottawa is planning to ban cosmetic testing on animals in Canada. The move will also apply to the sale of cosmetics that rely on animal testing that causes pain or suffering to animals. The proposed changes are part of the budget bill, which is currently moving through Parliament. Under the new rules, sellers will have to prove a product has been through safety testing that hasn't harmed animals, or it can't be sold in Canada. An exception would be if the product was already on store shelves when the ban goes into effect. The proposed ban follows similar moves over the years by the European Union, Mexico, India, and Israel. Canadian grocery chain Metro is reporting profits for its fiscal second quarter rose by more than 10%. The company says it increased sales in both its food and pharmacy divisions. The Montreal-based company says sales at its grocery operations climbed nearly 6% compared to a year earlier. Sales at its drugstore chain were up more than 7%. Metro posted a net income of $219 million for the quarter, an increase of $21 million over last year. Now, total sales for the second quarter were just over $4.5 billion, up $230 million from a year ago. Metro says the profit it makes on food is down because of higher costs, but that has been offset by higher profits at its pharmacies. Starting today, some Rogers customers calling the U.S. will be hit with a bigger fee. It's just one of several price increases recently introduced by different telecoms. Now, fee hikes aren't unusual, but as CBC's Sophia Harris reports, these ones come at a time when Ottawa is pushing for more affordable phone plans.
Crossing the U.S. border for a recent trip, TELUS customer Bruce Leslie needed to download his vaccine passport. He says it cost him $50 in roaming charges.
That doesn't seem to be rational. It just seems to be out of control.
Next time, Leslie will get a roaming plan. But he's disappointed TELUS's daily U.S. roaming rate jumped last month from $12 to $14.
When you're a regular customer paying, whatever you're paying, $75 to $100 a month, and then they just keep adding stuff on, it's just too much.
In March, TELUS and Bell each upped their daily roaming rates by $1 or $2. And Rogers is now raising its fee to make calls to the U.S. without a long-distance package to $1 per minute.
Right now, the pressure is for them to keep their plan prices low.
Ottawa has directed Canada's telecom watchdog, the CRTC, to ensure wireless services are affordable. This consumer advocate suggests the recent fee increases are a way for the telecoms to maximize profits without raising alarm bells.
We are definitely seeing this little creeping of fees in all of the little tiny pieces that add up collectively to quite an impact on customers.
The Canadian Wireless Telecommunications Association says there are plenty of phone plans on the market with special deals. But some phone plan prices have also gone up. Bell, Rogers, and TELUS each recently hiked their basic talk and text deals by $2 or $3 a month for new customers. This anti-poverty advocate doesn't approve.
These telecom companies, they need to stop being so greedy. I really can't understand why they need to do this to basic plans.
We reached out to the big three telecoms. None offered a reason for their price hikes. StatsCan says wireless costs have declined by 30% since 2019. But the CRTC is still concerned, at least about roaming fee hikes. It plans to launch a probe into the issue. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette is back to talk about the forecast. I have to admit, I pulled out the winter coat again today. I probably shouldn't have put it away. It was too optimistic, but it was cold this morning.
Yeah, Shannon, I am so with you because I actually made the mistake of not also bringing my mitts with me this morning for the dog walk. And I got out there and I was like, actually holding this leash, I need mitts. It was mostly because the wind, that breeze was still pretty cool early this morning. We started from 1 degree. Well, where is the heat? It's there. You can see it stretching through the Ohio Valley back towards the Midwest. That frontal boundary right about here. So getting a bit of pushback from this cooler air to the north, but the warmer air is going to be surging our way. So we will be seeing changes, not so much over the next 24 hours for the GTA, but over the next 48. They'll certainly be feeling it into southwestern Ontario, though, even just into tomorrow. So this is coming on in. Some of the active weather over Lake Michigan, mostly pushing into the state of Michigan. That'll be weakening somewhat, but still, it's going to be coming across Lake Huron and Georgian Bay later on. So we do overnight tonight get into some showers. The odd rumble of thunder possible. Most of it will have died off. Some weak showers into southwestern Ontario as well. Now through the Golden Horseshoe, dry for now into the later evening hours, but as we approach midnight, that's when I'd expect to see some scattered showers developing, kind of off and on through the overnight hours, and then here and there lingering early tomorrow morning. So many areas will be dry and there will be winds that will be, dying down and just a few wet roadways, but mostly we're going to be seeing things dying out in that regard. Then the warm front comes in too late in the day, pretty much for us to benefit from it in Toronto for Thursday. Never mind, Windsor's going to be into the mid-20s at least tomorrow. But into Friday, we get into that warmer sector. So we'll have a dry period. Then the rain showers are going to be coming back in later on Friday, getting into some periods of rain into Saturday. And yes, that's into our weekend where the colder air comes back in once again. Overnight tonight, temperatures looking like this. So we are going to see some of those readings, at least above freezing, but 3-4 degrees in terms of what we're talking about. Tomorrow, likely that we're only going to see 9 or 10 degrees for our high. But Friday, I am pushing us into the upper teens. We'll likely see some 20s on the board. And then we get on the backside of this and everything changes again. So we are back, Shannon, into more of a typical spring-like fashion here where it's an up and down and up and down.
We need all the layers and umbrellas and all the things. Okay, thanks, Colette.
Yes, you do need it all still.
As we head into the break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX dropping 4 points. The Dow fell 79. The dollar traded down to $74.30 US. We'll be right back. It is the largest documentary film festival in North America, and it's about to take over Toronto. Hot Docs kicks off next week. One of the films making its world premiere is called Sonara. It follows the story of a Toronto mom convicted of killing her teen daughter. After winning an appeal in 2021, she gets a new trial later this year. I spoke with the filmmaker bringing her story to the screen.
You've been convicted of the first-degree murder of your daughter.
It looks at her trial, her first trial. It looks at her appeal, and it really puts the justice system on trial itself to ask how could a mother who had lovingly taken care of her daughter for 16 years end up behind bars. Cindy was convicted of killing her daughter. Sonara had a disability. She had cerebral palsy and was entirely dependent on her mom for her care. We followed the appeal and we looked at the trial and we asked the questions, how is this possible? If you read the news headlines and you read the coverage, the media coverage of this story, you know, you would think this was a mother who wanted, you know, who stopped loving her daughter and thought she was a burden and wanted to kill her. And so I was really skeptical going in. And then after meeting Cindy and meeting the family and meeting the community, and also after digging a little bit, reading through the court transcripts, I realized that something was amiss. Like something wasn't lining up. And then as I got deeper into that investigation, so investigating myself, I realized that a lot of what Cindy experienced as someone who was a suspect and then someone who was charged and then finally convicted, I realized that there were a lot of gaps in the justice system that made people who were already vulnerable in our society even more vulnerable. And I realized that, you know, this couldn't be something that I could ignore.
The film, as you mentioned, examines a lot of things: first response, policing, the justice system. There was probably so much that was troubling and alarming to you, but what were some of the big ones?
I think what stood out to me is that we have a system that appears to value some people's voices over other people's voices, or some people's truths over other people's truths. And so what you'll see in the film is that, you know, professionals, first responders, you know, lawyers and folks in the system are believed. And then other people, women of color especially, aren't believed. And for me, that was really troubling. I think that's the thing that kind of stood out to me the most. Whose voices do we believe, and why do we believe them? Why do we take one person more seriously than another?
You mentioned the appeal, and we do know a new trial has been called for. Given everything that you've witnessed and learned and uncovered, you know, is there hope for justice, or what is the hope for the next trial?
I really, really hope that Cindy and her family don't have to relive again the injustices that they faced the first time around, and that have continued. Like, the incident happened in 2011, and we're in 2023. And so that's more than a decade of living with this reality of having to lose their daughter, and then also the nightmare that came afterwards. It's a really long time for a family.
Yeah, and Cindy has always maintained her innocence.
Yes, she's always maintained her innocence, and she's currently represented by James Lockyer, who some folks might know, has represented a lot of folks who have been wrongfully convicted.
The premiere's coming soon, April 30th. Mm-hmm. What is your hope when this project and this film goes out into the world and people see it?
Yeah, I really hope that everyone who's involved in the justice system, including news reporters, people who cover, kind of take a step back to ask, like, what is it that we're actually doing here? Who is it that we're protecting? How can we change this so that more people like Cindy and the Alleys don't have to face what they faced? How can we be thoughtful? How can we look at people and see them as humans first and not as a label? How can we think about disability a little bit differently, and about caregivers and those who care for those with disabilities differently? That's what I hope audiences will start to think about, and then maybe hopefully the powers that be as well.
Some of Canada's brightest track cyclists are in the GTA this week. They're competing in the Nations Cup as they try to rack up enough points to qualify for the 2024 Olympics in Paris.
This weekend is going to be a good test to see where I'm at. Worlds is a very big event at the end of July, where most of the points are for qualification for the Olympics. So that's definitely the focus. But being here and racing in front of friends and family and having the support of everyone here, it really helps fuel that fire.
I always knew I could do great things. I've always believed in myself, and I think coming into the Olympics, it will give me a little bit of confidence, but there's still a lot of hard work that needs to be done.
The Nations Cup begins tomorrow and runs through the weekend at the Mattamy National Cycling Centre in Milton. Nearly 30 Canadians will be competing, along with athletes from several other countries. Colette is back, and we were talking earlier about your Leafs blue eyeliner, and I overheard you telling somebody about your star jacket tonight, so now I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, I am a little bit, I guess, predictable that I like to dress in themes, so
Yes.
obviously supporting the Leafs. Yesterday, do you know, I was trying to figure out what do you wear theme-wise if you're going to the circus? And it's not exactly the circus, but I've never in my life been to a Cirque du Soleil show, and I am going tonight. So I don't know, does this cut it, Shannon?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, so that's the reason. So I'm really excited about it. Just I know I'm going to be blown away, but we'll meet back here tomorrow, and I'll probably be in blue since we've got another Leafs game on our hands. So 3 degrees overnight tonight. We'll have some showers overnight, lingering into tomorrow morning, and then Shannon, we're looking at 10 degrees for our high tomorrow, and getting more sun into the afternoon hours.
Okay, we'll need a full report tomorrow about Cirque.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks, Colette. Have a great night.
You too.
That is our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 6. We hope you have a great night.